Hello, this is IP Stories by 4IP Council, a podcast about innovation and intellectual property. Join us and you'll hear about the journeys through invention, creation, and IP understanding of our guests. I'm Fernanda.
And I'm Marta, and today we have with us Dr. Oliver Scherenberg. Oliver, would you be so kind to tell our audience about yourself and your career?
Totally, yes. So thank you, first of all, for having me and for inviting me to speak with you on this podcast. I'm very excited about this opportunity. Introducing myself means that I will probably have to tell much about my profession, about my professional career, but maybe I'll be able to share one or two motivations that come from a personal background as well. So, first of all, for the professional background, I'm an attorney at law in Germany. I'm located in Hamburg. And I have been specializing in intellectual property monetization for the past 18 years, so the entire career as an attorney. That had everything between copyright monetization all the way to patent pool monetization and copyright, especially now in the later sense, in the context of Web3, artificial intelligence, generative AI tools, metaverse, NFT projects, and so on.
And what attracted you to intellectual property in the first place?
Yeah, that's, to be honest, something that sounds much more like a plan when you talk about it today, but it was more of a random effect. When I was a student, I was having a winter job as a ski instructor. And during that time as a ski instructor, I was guiding two kids of a couple, and these two kids they came back one year after the other. And so when I was still at school, I didn't notice that this guy, so the father, had a profession that would be important. But when I started law school, we had a discussion once at lunch, and he said, "Well, now you study law, so I just want to let you know that I'm an attorney. So, would you ever be interested in having an internship? I might be able to help you." And ultimately, I went there for my first internship, which was after the fourth semester. He was a partner at Freshfields, or back then the earlier firms that then merged to become Freshfields, and he was active in the intellectual property department. So that is when I first got connected with that, and I stayed attached to that topic ever since.
That's amazing. You really never know where an opportunity can come from.
That's amazing. And I can relate because I also had a mentor that said to me, okay, he handed me a book saying, the title was Lifesavers for All. And he used to work at a pharmaceutical company. And that's how I got into IP as well. So it's great to have those mentors.
Very important. Yeah. And there was no attorney in my family really. So all of my family members are either engineers or people who studied economics or other things, but there's no lawyer really, no attorney. So I didn't really have guidance. And I also didn't really want to rely on connections my parents have. I thought that it was cooler to have my own connections, if you so want. And getting that established through something that you like skiing, and having your own connection, so to say. And I'm still a very close friend. Actually, he even became my boss in my first job. Like 10 years later, I started working for Freshfields. That was my first job as a young associate after my entire studies.
From all the experience you have advising businesses, what would you say is the most common misunderstanding regarding IP from the private sector?
I think many people don't take IP seriously, or at least many business people don't take it seriously. It's kind of, well, it's fun to have, or it's for the artists, it's for the creative industry, but I have nothing to do with that. And I think this is one of the biggest misunderstandings, especially when people are in the technology sector. They understand IP is crucial, but also in spaces where IP may just not be the first thing you mention. For example, in Web3 or in NFT projects, people have common misunderstandings that when they purchase an asset, that they get the intellectual property rights together with a physical item, or in this case, a digital item. Which means, and that is also how I actually entered the Web3 space, because I read so many stories about people who thought they bought an expensive NFT and they got the commercial use rights to exploit the picture that was attached to that token. And that is a misunderstanding where I said, well, no, look, people, it's a different thing. Like, for example, if you buy a book, you cannot just copy the book and sell copies of the book, or you cannot make a movie from the story of the book, or like print T-shirts from the cover of the book. All of that is totally clear, but some people still misunderstand that. And there has been a famous case of people purchasing an original copy of a what was it, of a script of of the movie Dune. I don't know if you're aware of that case, and they paid millions for it because they thought if they buy the book, this original script from the scriptwriter, then they would be allowed to do the movie. Which is, I mean, obviously a ridiculous mistake, but it was a very expensive one on top of that.
Hmm.
And if you are not educated in that, I think you may end up in a very weird spot. So the common mistake is to not take it seriously or to let yourself guide by misconceptions.
Yeah, so just to see if I understood correctly, is that those misunderstandings that led you to work on the like this virtual space in Web3 in NFTs? Is that what motivated you to actually provide some clearance and inform people about it?
Yes, I think it was one of the drivers. So first of all, certainly when clients came to ask for legal advice in the field, and since intellectual property monetization is my focus area, they already know that they may have an IP issue to deal with. So I was able to guide them through that. But becoming more and more active in the space myself, following other people and their reports, following discussions, I realized that there is this misconception about people buying something and while misjudging what they get for it. And that is when I started engaging more and asking questions. Hey, people, are you really sure? And why do you think you would get that? And the simple reason for that is there have been some NFT projects that were very explicit about we share the intellectual property right with you, or we share a license for you to use the image that is part of that non-fungible token. So people expected that to be the norm, which is not the case. And that is where I started indeed engaging more and more. And that is, I think, also the time when I became more active on, especially on LinkedIn, where I'm having frequent updates on intellectual property matters that I post about.
Okay, so yeah, that's it's really interesting to know how you got into the virtual space, and I heard about that case that you were talking about. I was wondering, working in such a changing sector with so much happening at the moment, I guess it must be very exciting in one hand, but also very challenging to keep up. How do you feel about it?
I think it's indeed very challenging, especially because the borders of especially Web3 are not totally clear, at least not from the client side. So my focus is monetizing intellectual property rights or giving advice on intellectual property rights. That can be everything from I have an NFT project, I need terms and conditions to clarify that I do provide certain use rights for the digital assets or not. I have a metaverse case where I want to showcase certain brands or I want to fight infringement of my brands. There may be copyright questions, for example, if you have an original artist that provided you with their art piece, but years ago already. So NFTs were not a topic back then. And now you want to create an NFT collection from that. So all these different things. These are the matters that where I would be engaged. Now, at the same time, typically the people's interest doesn't stop at IP licensing, but it just maybe starts there. So they also want to know how is it taxable? They also want to know, is there a regulatory issue in my country of residence? They also want to know, do I have to deal with other jurisdictions when I have this project? So it means whilst keeping yourself informed in your own comfort zone is probably something that comes naturally, but being able to also at least give indications or understanding where the problems are in, for example, regulatory law, tax law, property laws of different jurisdictions on top of that is very challenging indeed. So I try to have a frequent exchange with other attorneys specialized in Web3 and generative AI in other jurisdictions. I certainly also consume a lot of news letters and listen to Twitter Spaces, for example, or podcasts. Have certain articles that I read. And if you have a community that is engaging and everyone is trying to keep the other one updated, uh, it kind of works, but it is indeed a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine that. There's even in topics related to NFTs and crypto. There's even the problem of inheritance, and if people sometimes they lose the password or they lose their wallet, you have to have all this system put together for people to actually organize themselves and have the inheritance of these assets put together.
It's super challenging. So that is one of the downsides that comes with decentralization is that you are while self custodian of your own or whether self well let's say you have to rely on your own organization that you know you will find stuff again. You cannot just call a hotline and say, "Hey, I made a transaction to the wrong account. Can you please uh, pay that back to me?" Or you cannot have a service hotline to tell, "Look, the transaction failed and the money's gone." So this is something that people have to be aware of, and I think they are aware of that. With this challenge, or let's say with this upside of having a decentralized system with a self-governing environment, with no intermediaries and all of that, you may end up in a spot that is worse than before if you have no safety rails. And consumer protection is one of the main issues that people see in these Web3 technologies, and that is also standing in the way of mass adoption at this point, I think.
Absolutely. And recently, there's so much talk about AI in the context of authorship and licensing. What is, in your opinion, the main issue we need to sort out as a society before we continue going down this road?
I think artificial intelligence has a lot of challenges, especially the challenge that no one really seems to understand what is going on, how they are working, how they are training themselves. And even while the inventors of these generative AI or these large language models openly admit that they don't exactly understand what is going on, I think that's rather frightening. That is frightening from various perspectives. First of all, certainly again consumer protection, but it goes a lot further here. And I mean, just today, the European Parliament basically approved the European AI Act that will come into force and effect in probably 2 or 3 years from now only. But they have some indications where they see dangers for society. They see certain areas of business or of social life that shall not be governed by artificial intelligence, like social scoring, for example, or also some key decisions that shall simply be made by humans and not machines, that have a very professional or a very private approach. And I think it is difficult to keep up the standards in such a new technical environment, but it is absolutely necessary that people can trust also in these technologies. And therefore, to be quite honest, I'm rather happy to be in an environment where consumer protection, where maybe also even data protection and other regulatory impacts play a certain role and give preference to the full technological advancement. Now we have a governmental framework that we can work with. It is a regulatory framework that may be stricter than elsewhere, but I think it is in line with our expectations and also our ethics.
Yeah, so I was doing a little bit of homework for a chat today, and I realized that not so long ago you were focused on standard essential patents, patent pools, licensing programs. So I was wondering, do you have any lessons learned from this past experience that you could apply in NFT and metaverse, AI, and Web3?
I think so, yes. So indeed, until the end of last year, actually, I was an outsourced general counsel for a patent monetization firm that was one of the leading providers of less standard essential patent licenses in the telecommunications sector. So 3G, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, DVB, MP3 in the earlier days, DVB, audio video coding, and all these things. And that was indeed a very exciting time. And what I learned from that is that also the expectations from users and market or legal realities may be a bit different. Having said that, consumers would expect that technology is free and available to everyone, especially key technologies like 5G. They don't really want to pay more just because the phone has this feature, but they certainly expect the phone to work, or at least that is what the implementers of the technologies tend to say. They say, well, this technology is key, access, everyone has to have access to it, which is absolutely undeniably true. So everyone needs to have an access, but if you pay for it. And therefore, what I learned from this earlier experience was innovation only works if you have an innovation life cycle where the money that is earned elsewhere through the technology comes back to those who made the inventions. And if you transfer that idea also to generative AI, for example, there needs to be a way not only to say that those who create the tools for generative AI get a certain compensation, so it cannot be open source. Why should it? Someone invested a lot of research and development money to use that. So subscription models in the future will certainly make sense. But also from the perspective of the copyright, the creative people, they will only be creative if they can expect a certain return. So there is a certain necessity for compensation if there is a creation, if there is an innovation. Otherwise, creation and innovation will simply cease in the future if people cannot expect a return on their investments.
Yeah, I have the feeling that there is a lot of misunderstanding about AI and training data. Could you explain in a very simple way why is it such a touchy topic? Would you say that it's connected to open source and compensation and getting the return of their investments?
I think so, yes. And especially if you consider how large language models typically work or generative AI tools work. So I think the easiest picture would be that you take a lot of information and you put it into a blender. And then you start mixing everything together, and some sort of sauce comes out. So you put the information on top, and you add some prompts or some user input, and then you will get a certain result. So the result that comes out, first of all, may not be copyright protected, but that's a different story. We're talking about the training data first. So if you put copyrighted material on top, and you do not have the rights to use them, maybe in some jurisdictions you have because data mining is legal or scraping data may be legal, but just assume that you have no license to use that data. Well, if you put it in the blender, the entire sauce will have a certain contamination, probably, maybe at least. At least you use someone else's creative input and someone else's creations for which they invested time and money, and you make something out of that. So I think it goes almost without saying that that doesn't work, that cannot work. How should it? Why should anyone bother doing things in the future if everyone can just come and take it and make something else out of it? That's simply typically not what copyright law suggests in most jurisdictions, at least, and it is also not something that you would expect as an artist. So maybe if it is legal or not, you would at least have a certain moral question mark in front of you if you see that. And what you see in consequence of that is that many generative AI tools now only work on the basis of licensed data. So, for example, Adobe Firefly is based on Adobe dataset, or Shutterstock has their own generative AI tool. So they say the entire input of our training data is based on legal data. That means if you put everything in the blender, you can hit as hard as you want. Everything that comes out is at least not illegal, at least not from the standpoint of copyright protection. If you consider that scraping, which means almost like running through the internet and taking pictures of everything you see and then saying, well, it's just like a person running through a museum and reproducing what they saw, or whatever argument you may have, then that may at least potentially be problematic data. And therefore, I think today you have two different ways of approaching the data mining. One is, for sure you will have legal data, or maybe you have legal data, or even the third way would be just ignoring it and also taking illegal data by scraping or by taking copyrighted material.
I'm going to go back now to businesses and particularly to SMEs and startups. What advice would you give to startups that are willing to leverage metaverse and NFTs from an IP perspective? What are the right preliminary questions they should consider?
So I think I would direct them certainly to a knowledge base that I helped to create, which is about exactly these initial questions on different Web3 topics. So topics like non-fungible tokens, metaverse, generative AI, or ENS domains, which is something like a URL description for a wallet address. Or so these are some of the different topics that we have. Also, decentralized autonomous organizations. So these are some of the key topics in Web3 environments. And this database is something that I created starting last year, and it is still active and growing, which is basically a summary of legal questions that we curated for these topics, and answers that are then provided by attorneys and tax advisors from different jurisdictions, which means you as a user can go there. It's a free resource. It's called Web3 Lex. You can go to that database and check it. And if you see that in Germany, for example, the question, if I buy an NFT, do I get the commercial use rights to for the digital asset? You see the answer is no, unless someone else grants you the rights. And then you say, well, how is it in the US? And then you can click and compare the different national laws. What we have there is a network of international experts that provide their national views. So you not only have a knowledge base, but you also directly get access to people who could help you further if you have additional questions. And then you would certainly have to go and create a client-attorney relationship. But it is a resource that I would recommend. So I'm shamelessly promoting my own project. If you ask me, I think that was a good starting
Yes, of
point.
course. We will make sure that we share the link because I think it can actually be very useful for so many people. So we are reaching the end, and I have one final question for you, Oliver. I saw that your virtual attorney avatar decided to quit just a few days after having started his new job to become a beach boy. Is this a hint?
Yeah, it absolutely is a hint. No question about that. So it's funny that you mentioned that virtual lawyer avatar. Well, indeed, I'm dealing with generative AI tools every day, not only because clients are using them and asking if they can use the output created by these tools, but I also use these tools myself just to upgrade my posts, to make them a bit more interesting, and simply because I'm interested in technology and want to see what you can do. And one idea indeed has been to install a virtual person that you can communicate with, like a chatbot, but a person that really has a synchronized way of talking to you on the website of Web3 Lex. So you come to the website, and instead of just typing stuff in the search field, you can say, hey, welcome to Web3 Lex. What can I do for you? Do you want to access the knowledge base? Then let me have your question. I may be able to guide you to the answer. Or, hey, do you want to meet an attorney? Where are you from? Let me help you find the right person. So, and then certainly the next step is, and that is something that we will see in the upcoming future, that people will want to communicate instead of Googling. They don't want to go through search results themselves. They just ask a question, they want the result, like having a conversation. And this way of having a conversation certainly will lead also to, well, if you can guide me through the page, maybe you can also help me answer a couple of legal questions. And while developing this idea further, led me to the idea of creating a scenario where I'm duplicated as a virtual lawyer avatar. And I made this post about this virtual Oliver replacing me because I was busy doing other things. but it is a bit of my sense of humor and also my idea of showing people that it's not, everything is not glorious. So it went completely wrong, because I mean, I created the video, I gave the text, and I made this virtual lawyer completely go rogue, lock me in my house, raise the hourly rates, and just then work around the clock. Just to showcase people, look, you may be screwed if you rely on artificial intelligence instead of just talking to me, because I'm your attorney and you can trust me. And the follow up post that I made is just of that same virtual lawyer who just thought he had the super career. That virtual lawyer avatar then retired because it said, well, there is no point in being a lawyer if I can also be a beach boy. And indeed, maybe it's a secret dream of every attorney to stop working as a lawyer early and becoming a beach boy. At least I think it's mine. It's hinting at
I
that.
mean, we laughed so much when we were listening to it, when we were watching it.
Good.
Actually, yes, we have to remember to also share your LinkedIn, because I think
Yes, please.
it was great, and also going through some of your posts. Yeah, we really enjoyed them.
And I'm really thankful and really appreciate that you mentioned my LinkedIn, because that is something where I communicate. I try to share some of my views. And if you like it, and you seem to do, that is very much appreciated and shows that it's maybe time well invested. Thank you so much.
Yes, definitely it is. Well, thank you so much, Oliver, for spending this time with us and having this chat. We really enjoyed it, and you made a lot of things really clear.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me once again. And it's been a pleasure being with you. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Oliver. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening to IP Stories by 4IP Council. Visit our website on 4ipcouncil.eu to find out more and check out the links mentioned during this episode. If you liked it, remember to share and subscribe.